Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Yay! We're back with our spring Tap into History series. So tonight we're going to have an excellent interactive field trip presentation on the popcorn wagon, the George Hasey Popcorn Wagon. We're delighted to have Mr. Stroschein here tonight, Al Stroschein. A couple of housekeeping items first. We do have a couple of sheets going around for you to sign up on. You can sign up to receive society news and information, or sign up to be a volunteer for the Columbus Area Historical Society. And we also are going to be having a tour next week. The Farmers and Merchants Bank, our very own Jewel Box Bank, has arranged for us to take a tour at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, May 24th. And so you don't have to be a member to go on the tour with us. This is free and open to the public, but we hope you'll join us. May is National Preservation Month, so we really want to celebrate the history that we're preserving all across Columbus and our area. So, then we've also rescheduled the April Tap in History, which I was going to do, is who was Governor James Taylor Lewis. His house is up on James Street, just a few blocks away from here. And that has been rescheduled for Wednesday, June 21st at 6 p.m. So we hope you'll join us then. Thank you so much to Tea Time for hosting us. And without further ado, I welcome Mr. Al Stroschein.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Helen meant what she said about us being interactive. I know just about everybody in the building this evening, and you all have been involved in historic preservation, historic society, Columbus Popcorn Wagon, Inc., that we're going to be talking about, and of course George Hasey's Wagon that we're going to be viewing. And rather than bringing it out tonight, it is a lovely evening. It's not so hot, it's not so cool. It's a perfect night to go visit the wagon where it's currently being stored, rather than putting it on a hitch and bringing it up to tea time. It's only a block away. Currently, it's at Nathan Roberts and George Roberts building on East James Street, and that's where it's been stored. The wagon's history is long. George Hasey's legacy in Columbus is long. I happened to be reading the shopping reminder this weekend, and there was a listing of people that had been in business for 50 years in 1973. And 1973 is a very important year for me because it's the year I graduated from high school, so I'm celebrating my 50th reunion this year. And it's also the year that George Hasey was in business for 50 years in 1973, along with a number of other stellar people. But the wagon has had such, and George has had such a long history in the community that I don't know really where to begin, other than to say that there's tragedy. It reads as a novel. John and Darlene Marks, I believe, have brought some memorabilia from the old days, because not to date them, but they go back to George Hasey's operation of the wagon. And I called Shirley Benetsky today, and she's babysitting a great-granddaughter, but she was one of the employees that worked for 50 cents an hour in George Hasey's Popcorn Wagon when she was just a teenager. But George had an original wagon that he got. This wagon that we have now is the 1928 Dunbar wagon, and it's not his original wagon. The wagon, at one time he had two wagons on the streets of Columbus, and you're thinking it was a different age, a different time. People came downtown on weekends, they shopped locally, and I happened to live in Beaver Dam, and maybe out of the corner of my eye when my parents would drive through Columbus, if we could get by the railroad tracks, we could see George Hasey's popcorn wagon parked up at the Four Corners next to Sherrill's, selling popcorn. But I can't actually recall ever buying popcorn at that wagon from George. The the start of the popcorn wagon, and I don't know, John or Darlene, if you want to come up here and give some comments about those years back when you were a young lad and lassie, and what you remember about, I mean, he sold roasted peanuts, he had popcorn, and I get the feeling he was a real social guy. The wagon was sold in 1979. Unfortunately, I didn't come to Columbus until 1980, so I missed the wagon being here. George had passed away, and as part of the estate proceeding, the bids for this wagon got so high that no local person was able to purchase it. We're talking about 1970s dollars, and we're talking that in, I believe it's over $16,000 that the wagon sold for at that time. So the original wagon was not necessarily replaced, but there were two wagons. And John, were you around when there were two wagons on the streets?
Yes, I was.
John, would you care to talk about that? Why don't you come on up here so that Dave can get, and maybe I can do a little interviewing of you. I have to get in practice because I'm doing an advertisement for the Columbus Redbud Prince and Princess contest, which is this Saturday, and I get to interview 5, 6, and 7-year-old.
Just your age limit.
Just my age limit, right. So, John, tell me about the popcorn wagon, as you recall it, being a young lad of 5, 6, 7, or 8 years old.
I lived across the street from George.
It's along the wall, so you're not backlit.
Ah, okay.
Oh, you want us here?
You want to see her?
Okay.
There's too much glare over our foreheads. Okay.
Well, maybe yours is not one.
Okay, so what do you recall about the wagons?
I was 9 years old when George's daughter was burnt in that wagon. And at the same time, the same day, there was a drowning out at the swimming pool. A local businessman's son drowned at the swimming pool the same day. And I remember George's wagon, and I remember George sitting on a stool and a fan blowing, and he would take and pour the one pail of corn, then he'd turn it over and pour it the other way. And I thought, what is he doing? What do you people think he was doing?
Making popcorn?
What were you saying? Making popcorn? Is that what he said? What was he doing, John?
What do you think he was doing?
Well, he was trying to get rid of the deadheads, the chaff,
yes.
and
That's how he
would
cleaned his popcorn.
clean
There
it.
was a fan there, and it was blowing, and it blowed the chaff off the
Chaff. Winnowing, yes. The chaff off of the corn. Now, he only had the one child, and she died in that in that wagon.
Right. And I can remember her when we all played in Washington Park, the whole neighborhood, all the neighborhood kids played in Washington Park. And what stood out to me is she had a black and white lumberman jacket, shirt. It was black and red, and that stood out. And then we had this culvert at the end of Washington Park that went across the highway, and that was for excess water if it ever had. And then we'd always crawl through there and to the other end, under the highway.
Oh, of course, you did that as a kid. Heath, you're not listening to any of this, okay? So where at that particular time, where would he have stored these wagons?
He had one in his garage at his residence,
And where was his residence at that time?
Ludington Street by Washington Park.
Oh, that garage right up the street from me at Ludington.
That garage was the two-car garage. He had his car on one side and one of the wagons on the other side, and then he had different places that he had the other wagon that he stored.
Okay. Now, fast forwarding, we know because I believe you and Darlene accompanied Alice Schmidt and others when we went down to Illinois.
Right.
Okay. Just by, I call it a God wink or what have you, that particular wagon that his daughter was killed in had a resurrection.
She wasn't killed.
She wasn't. She died. I'm sorry. Burns. She died of burns from that wagon because she couldn't get out. She just couldn't get out, and her burns.
It was a flash fire.
The flash fire that you have from the heat and the oil and the gas, and she died. But there's a resurrection of that wagon. The resurrection of that wagon occurred in Illinois, and Alice Schmidt had a lot to do with some of the history of that. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Or together,
George
can we?
had this wagon. He planned on restoring that wagon, and he spent hours and hours trying to restore it. And eventually, I don't know whatever happened, but it just disappeared from the city of Columbus. And we didn't hear about it until after
Many, many years
many,
later.
many years, right?
Yes.
And there was a wart on the bottom of the wagon, and that's how this guy found out George's wagon and where it came from. So then he started asking questions around.
I'm gonna pass this around, and Heath, since you're the youngest person here, maybe you can look at it first. It's only through having people like Heath here tonight that we can pass on history. All of us have got many history under the treads of our feet, but Heath can read about this, and in a little while, Heath, you're going to see this actual wagon. But the wagon that's you're going to see was purchased, I believe, at $1,650, which was a fantastic sum of money in 1928, just a year before the Depression.
She paid for it, though. That's what it sold for at the auction.
No, $1,600. $1,600. Yes, I said $1,600.
It sold for $16,000.
Yes, it sold for $16,000 at the auction. So, and of course, the auction was in 1979, 50 years. He had it on the streets for, well, I think 1974 was the last year he operated it.
Right.
But it then had many, and this is the second wagon. The first wagon was lost and was recovered down in Illinois. It's now in a what you would call a museum type atmosphere. It's
Glenview, Illinois.
It's in Glenview, Illinois. It's in it's a farm in the middle of residential subdivision, probably a 40 or 80 acre farm that they have tried to capture early 20th century, late 19th century farming means and what have you. And this is on display in the in the museum, but there's also a gift shop, of course, and there are farm buildings and cattle and sheep and what have you. It's a nice place to visit on a day trip down in Glenview. And we had the opportunity before Alice passed away to go down there and view it. And it actually came here in 2015. In 2015, it was in our 4th of July parade. We had both wagons in the parade. It was Kathy and I were the parade marshals that year, and we had both wagons, and it was a wonderful experience to do that. But John, how did he get enough workers to work here in this wagon?
Well, anybody would work back then, anything to make a living, or just to have something to do.
Okay, and
He had no problem.
okay, and he would pick the prettiest little girl or young lady, or did he have guys working too?
Well, the only one he ever had that I knew of was his nephew, Jim.
Okay,
Jim Hasey.
Jim Hasey, his nephew.
But
Okay,
He had Joe Vick. And
Okay.
She was a school bus driver, and she
Yeah.
was an older lady.
yeah,
And then he had Ruth Voss,
Okay.
and Shirley Hoffman, and a few other, and Lorraine Basie.
We should also mention that George had a school bus route for many, many years in addition to operating the wagons. And I think that eventually turned into the Kurths, correct?
Yes.
The Kurths took that over
1955.
in 1955. We have a question from the Peanut Gallery. Would you speak up loudly so we could hear?
One of his helpers was in Beaver Dam. Her name was Donna Grenke, and I went to the county normal with her. But she worked there a lot and helped him out.
Donna Grunke? And Grenke, and she lives in Beaver Dam? Okay. You know, now the people that worked for George are in their 70s, 80s, maybe even their 90s. George would be well over 100 years old if he was alive today. Alice Schmidt was in the same class as his daughter.
Alice Schmidt left town when she was 7 years old and went to Randolph. She never graduated from Columbus.
Okay. Well, but she was the same age as
Yes,
his
right.
daughter. Yeah.
They were born about.
They were born within a couple days of each other. I know that Alice's birthday is about July 6th, so or maybe it was July 4th. Alice's
4th.
July 4th. Alice's birthday was on July 4th.
She was a couple days later. I think.
Yeah, I think a couple days later, right? But the wagon that we have today that he bought in 1928 left in this auction. So they had this big auction in and we just couldn't keep it. Columbus couldn't keep it, so it went out to California eventually.
No, it was in Virginia City first.
Well,
Virginia. The guy that bought it, and he lost it in a card game. That's how it ended up in Placerville, California, and Camille, California.
Well, up in northern, and I don't know if you want to start passing around pictures here. That
And when
we
George
can.
had the wagon, it was yellow, the original Dunbar yellow.
Yeah. There are points made in that article that we're passing around regarding that. That it's changed so much. Life in Columbus has changed so much that the businesses downtown have morphed into different businesses. It's more of a service economy rather than a retail economy. You don't get the people down here on weekends. I grew up in Beaver Dam. We used to go downtown on Friday evenings and you'd converse with people. You'd go from car to car and you'd buy popcorn and what have you. Or you'd go to a local restaurant and maybe have a cup of soup or chili or what have you. Now things are in malls and what have you, and the popcorn wagon ended up, it was in a casino out for a period of time out west. And then a lady by the name of Edie Bullard out in California, her husband had died, and she had the wagon. And Todd Fry, who many of you know, that's a local resident, and Kim Schleicher went out there to take and scope this out about 1995 or 1996. And at that time, she wanted $50,000 for this wagon, which is, they maintained it, they kept it up, but as John said, they'd painted it,
They painted it red because of being in the apple orchard and because it sat outside all the time. The wood on it really deteriorated. It isn't like it was when George had it.
But it's also 95 years old, and I don't think any 95-year-old is in the same condition they were when they were 20. Okay, all right. Well, Darlene takes very good care of you. As a nurse, she takes very good care of you. So, what happened at that point, and that's where I become involved in this, is that the local citizenry and I thought I was nuts because they came to me and said, "Well, we got this popcorn wagon. It's an icon of our community. We want to bring it back. How can we bring it back? And we got to do it by the end of 1996." Because that is the deadline on buying this. She's only given us that time on the offer to purchase. We've got to come up with $50,000. So rather than form a nonprofit corporation, which takes time to go through the IRS and get 501c3 designation and yada yada, we set up a for-profit corporation with the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions. And I, for the first time in my life, had to go to the Wisconsin Securities Commission and do a prospectus on the sale of stock for a small corporation that was for business, that we were going to allow people to purchase stock for $100 a share. And because of the laws at that particular point in time, we could not sell the stock outside the state of Wisconsin. It was only in Wisconsin. It's kind of like Spotted Cow beer in New Glarus. You can't sell it out of the state of Wisconsin. Think of that. So we sold shares of stock in 1996 to various people. Most of them just bought a share for themselves, maybe their wife, their children, or what have you. But as the year progressed, we realized we weren't going to get close to the full $50,000. But we had a very community-minded citizen, and at that particular point in time, it was right about the time, you're going to find this very, very ironic, because it was that point in time that the federal government actually was running a budget surplus, the stock market was booming, people had money in their pocket, and they wanted to make charitable donations. We had the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation, which had been set up for our Main Street program, for the Whitney Building, and for other designations in the community. That philanthropic individual gave his shares of stock in a couple of different well-appointed stock that had gone up in value. It was sold by the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation. They, in turn, put it into the popcorn wagon, and we had in our bylaws that you could not get more than one vote, no matter if you had 10 shares or 300 shares. And they have about 300 shares in their wagon. They have about a $30,000 investment, the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation. I know that it's changed from time to time, but the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation has done a lot of good things over the years in our community, one of them being bringing the George Hasey Popcorn Wagon back. So in 1996, we were successful in getting the wagon back in the purchase, but it took 1997. It was Red Bud Days, and I'm wearing the relic. It still fits after 25 years of the wagon when we brought it back in 1998 on Red Bud Days. It's so convenient. We're coming up with Red Bud Days this weekend. It was a marvelous day. It was a bright, sunshiny day. We brought the wagon out. It was covered under a tarp. We took it by the boulevard, and we had the redbud trees in full bloom. It was bright sunshine, 75 degrees. Unveiled it, and Julius Temkin sold the first popcorn out of the wagon. And there was a heated auction between Alton and Bernetta Mather and Dave and Betty Wright, who at the time were in Alaska, and they were calling in their bids from Alaska. But eventually, for I believe it was $1,000, that first bag of popcorn from the from the renewed wagon back in the community was sold to Alton and Bernetta. So in 1998, we had the wagon back. But here it starts to get kind of murky again.
Okay, this is the original wagon. That's
Okay.
George bought. And he bought that from Artie Brocka. Artie Brock. no,
Is that a picture of
Fred Brocka.
Fred Brocka.
Fred? Is that a picture of Fred?
Yes.
Yeah, you can tell the Brockups, because the Brockups, Mrs. Brockup, Mrs. Miller was a Brockup.
Right.
Mrs. Miller was a Brockup. So that would have been her father or uncle, probably.
Her father.
Her father, okay. So if you know Al and Glenn Miller in the community, their mother would have been the, well, this would be their grandfather.
Yeah.
This would be Al and Glenn Miller's grandfather.
Service, and George
Yeah.
always watched how he was.
Yeah, and this is World War I we're talking about, not World War II. So we're going to pass this around. You're going to pass, okay. So in 1998, we had the wagon back, but we didn't have a real decent business plan for the wagon. We had the Columbus Popcorn Wagon, Inc. established. We had shares of stock, and as a for-profit corporation, we had to maintain all the records, transfer shares of stock, do a corporate income tax return, a Form 990, and do that annually. And we had to have insurance on the wagon, which we maintain until this very day. And that's one of the more substantial costs for the wagon, is maintaining that insurance. And because we are a for-profit corporation, Wisconsin law requires that we have workers' comp insurance, even though no one has ever been paid a nickel in compensation. So we pay workers' comp, and then we get reimbursed for most of that, but it's a pain in the butt to keep it up. So that's some of the things that we've continued to do. But between 1998 and today, many of you that are in the room know what's happened to the wagon, because you've lived it, you've seen it. It's been, for a period of time, it's been in the 128 West James Street building, which is now the workshop, lovely business. But for a period of time, Dave Woodard had the popcorn wagon station down there. He had a kind of a soda fountain, and the wagon was there. And George's wagon was so beloved that Alton and Bernetta Mather bought the building, 128 West James Street. I believe Lee Columbus was involved in CDDC at the time, and it was refurbished, and the wagon was there for a number of years. But the business plan for the wagon and that type of operation, soda fountain and hamburger joint or hot dog joint. I don't know if you want to speak as to this, Lee, because you lived this during this period of time. You want to get up? Why don't you get up here and talk about? Because you're Lee Columbus, city's named after him, so treat him with respect. Treat him with respect.
Yeah, I moved when they changed the hospital name. Yeah, these were great times. They bought the building for us, as the Popcorn Wagon folks, and we moved the Popcorn Wagon in, rented out the building to a chef from Wanakee, and he started a business there with the wagon there, and it was complementary to his business. But as things went on and he moved on, and the building was a great place, but they still had to run a business out of it, and it became more difficult. I don't know, I don't think CDDC was in that building, were they? No. Okay. Yeah, so it was, that was nice. Yes. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Well, eventually, the wagon kind of got pushed back in that building, and then when it first came back, I should say that first day when it came back in Redbud Days, I remember going to Mullins. Mullins was already open at Redbud Days back on that year. I think they opened because of the wagon being back and because it was such a beautiful day, and they had more help back in 1998. And I remember going with Kathy and Dennis Tycho down to Mullins in the evening after a beautiful day with a wagon. And I remember the exact words that Dennis Tycho said to me. He said to Kathy and I, "This is a wonderful community reminisce." The whole community came together. It's kind of like we try to do on the 4th of July. We all try to come together, no matter if we wear red or blue, whether or not we're liberal or conservative or whatever. We all try to come together on the 4th of July. And when we had that wagon back the first day, I remember distinctly, he said it was a community reminisce. And we've tried to keep that theory, or not that theory, that fact going since that time, a community reminisce. And at one point, we had it out on the street on weeknights, or Friday nights and things. And Dave and Betty Wright were instrumental. George Jordan, I can go on and on. People that have been wonderful, wonderful patrons and wonderful, wonderful friends of the Popcorn Wagon. Dennis actually paved that area next to Lean's Garage. And if you're new to the community, Lean's Garage is that corner building where the flower shop is now. He paved that with paving bricks, and the wagon would sit out there for that period of time. I used to have a law office at 132 South Ludington, and for a period of time after we sold it, Bruce Krause had a business there, and that wagon was back there for a winter or two. So it moved around, and it found its home when the Mathers bought 128 West James Street, we thought. But then, in a stroke of, I don't know if it was luck, good luck, bad luck, or no luck, we got Darvin Fry involved, and he took it up to Badger Motor Car Company. And many of you got to the Badger Motor Car Company when it was up. He got it into the building, and he had a very eclectic amount of memorabilia of Columbus. I remember he had that merry-go-round of horses that I believe is from St. Jerome's, from one of their festivals or what have you. He had that there, he had the popcorn wagon there, and he had a whole bunch of other memorabilia and just fun stuff to go see. But eventually all good things come to an end. He didn't have food there. The business model didn't work. And so it moved back to 128 West James Street, and that's when Becky Widner started the workshop, and she pushed it into the back because it didn't fit her business model. And to this day, she has a very nice, successful business there with her workshop. So eventually, yes, Joyce?
Who owns that now?
128 West James Street is owned by Becky. By Becky Widner. She owns the building. She bought the building. We broke the lease. There was a lease in place for us to be permanently there with Alton and Bernetta. They may be rolling in their grave right now. Yeah, but times change. Did you have something, Ann?
I wanted to make a comment about Dennis. He not only did that, said what he said to you and did that, but when it went on the first auction from here, he and I had plans on buying it, but we had no idea it would go for $16,000. We got to $10,000 in the auction and looked at each other and said, we can hardly afford that. So we dropped out. But Dennis had all intentions of owning that and us putting it back on that corner.
So there have been, and we've gone, John and I have gone through and lead to the past, and, the past leading up to the present. And I just want to acknowledge the people that are on the Columbus Popcorn Wagon Inc. board right now. I'm president. We have Jory Habenicht in the back of the room, who's our secretary. Lee is treasurer. We have Greg Kipe, who is a wonderful mechanic and just, he's somehow related by second cousin to Alice Schmidt. He lives out on Highway 60. George Jordan couldn't be here tonight because he's presenting awards at the assembly for high school students in the Fall River. And Ann Eilenfeld is also a member of our board. And I think I caught everybody, I think. So we meet sporadically now. We used to meet every month. We used to be more active. We've tried to raise money by selling popcorn at the 4th of July. As our numbers have dwindled and we've aged, we've kind of hard to get it out out in the open. But boy, it's getting warm in here, and I'd like to go ask questions from the floor here about the wagon, and tell you that where we are right now, and where we have a vision for the future.
So what are the thoughts of painting it yellow like it was before instead of the red apple orchard? People don't recognize it as the wagon that was here before.
Well, people your age don't recognize it, but other people don't. Other people don't.
They don't know.
They don't know. They don't know, and that's a good point. But that costs money, and right now we can barely. Our treasurer would say we probably got enough money for another year and a half in our coffers right now, unless we start going out and trying to get donations and raising and selling stock and that sort of thing. So yes, painting it would make sense. It would restore it back to the but having
when George had it, he had it yellow, but then when according to the Dunbar wagon, it's kind of a John Deere yellow. So that's the difference that George had compared to what the original Dunbar wagon was. So, and George had balloon tires on it, where before it was just hard rubber tires.
Okay. Well, we're I don't know. I don't want to speak for the few of us that are here, but we want to make sure this continues to be an icon of Columbus history. It's not going away, but eventually, if we don't have enough money, we'll have to look on our shareholders to say, ante up money, because we have to pay the expenses to keep this wagon going. The insurance, the workers' comp, the tax return preparation. It costs some postage to do an annual meeting. We have an annual meeting the third Saturday in September by our bylaws. Traditionally, we've done it at the park, Fireman's Park Pavilion. We've done it at my law office. We've had it, I think, in the old days, at the brewery. We've had it at the Farmers and Merchants Union Bank basement.
You had it in Waterloo at your bank?
No,
but that
no.
might be an option.
No. The last time the wagon has been out, Lee had it out in September for the Weenie and Kraut Days in Waterloo, and he was transported on a trailer down there for the day. He got it back safely, and it was it was out, and people saw it. We need to get it out. One of our ideas, and we did get architectural plans for this, was to put it in a freestanding building under the southeast corner of the pavilion. The pavilion has had wonderful philanthropists give money for the elevator and the windows and the roof, and it's been painted. It gets a lot of use. Amy Jo Myers gets it used every weekend. And we thought, gosh, if we could put it there, it could be pulled out for weddings, it could be pulled out for parades, it could be pulled out for Red Bud Days, but it could be put inside and people could see it and it could be more used. And there is a plan now too for having a new entrance to the pavilion where the beer garden is. I don't know where the stage of that is. I looked to Beth or other people where that is, but they're working hard right now in the rest haven and they want to complete that right now. So there's only so much money to go around in the community. Helen.
So have you sold all of the stock? Are you still looking for?
If you have $100 right now, we could sell you a share of stock.
Okay, and then if people wanted to support like if they didn't want to be a shareholder but wanted to
support that's our long-term goal. You kind of stole our thunder. We want to become, that's a good segue. We want to become the Friends of the Columbus Popcorn Wagon, the Friends of the George Hasey Popcorn Wagon. We don't want to operate it. We don't want to have a corporation that we have to annually report to the state and what have you. Because if you don't report after 3 years, it goes kaput. And then where are we going to be with a wagon that sits? And Nathan Roberts has not charged us a penny for where it's stored. And I would like to take everyone down there and we'd pull it out and you can take a look at it. It's dusty. It's dirty. It hasn't been cleaned up for the spring summer yet, but it's I think, despite what my friend John is saying about the color and what have you, it's in a pretty darn good condition for being that old. I mean it has its beveled glass, it has the George Hasey name on it. It is a cool thing, and is despite me being. Yes, Helen.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to.
No, go ahead.
So there are kind of two ways to look at artifacts like this, right? You can either continue to use it or you can put it behind glass. What's your goal as a group? Do you feel like it still has some use out of it to continue to safely make popcorn, or would you like to see it be preserved?
I don't know. You're more technically knowledgeable about it maybe than I am, Lee, but I don't think you can safely make popcorn in it. You can't safely make popcorn in it.
We use a separate popper, electric popper.
Electric.
Right.
So we don't use the mechanisms that are there.
Right.
And that works out fine for us. But yeah, finding the right place to put it, and it would be fine if we eventually get a historical society building and have that in it. That would be, at this point, a wonderful thing.
There has to be collaboration between the Columbus Popcorn Wagon Inc., the Historical Society, and the CHLPC. I'm not as keen on the idea of having it at the pavilion as I was maybe 2 years ago, because there have been other things that have happened in the community, and that, buildings that have become available that could house, you've lost your location for the museum and the old First National Bank building. Thanks for jogging my memory. And just tonight, when we were working down at the garage where on 120 East James Street, a gentleman came to take out a boat that he has in storage, and he said, well, I work for Nathan Roberts, and now it appears that the city is going to want to take over the old Countryside garage where Nathan has had his trucks and things stored, and they want to take that back over, so all the snow removal equipment and everything will have to be stored somewhere. Well, guess where that will be? That will be back on East James Street, and then the popcorn wagon will be looking for a new home. So we have to be collaborative. You folks don't have money growing on trees either as a historical society. You need a place to have your memorabilia, and we need a place to have the popcorn wagon. So we have to have some, for the future, we have to have some collaboration. Yes?
I just had some questions about the Dunbar manufacturing company.
It's still in business.
Okay. They still make popcorn wagons?
Yes.
Okay.
They still make popcorn wagons. You can Google them. Chicago. I don't know if it's. I think it's actually Chicago. I think the address is Chicago. But they've been building popcorn wagons for well over 100 years. Well over 100 years. And they still make them. Probably not as well made as George Hasey's. Not like they were.
Right. And the paint isn't like it was either.
No, no. Would everybody like to go down and see the wagon?
This is fine.
This should be good.
No, I won't.
How did he get in there?
Thank you.
You want to go inside?
Yes. Hey girls, take pictures.
Take a picture.
I guess. I don't always have my phone at the ready.
What happened to the glass shelves?
Glass shelves?
There used to be glass shelves in here.
Really? Used to be
Yeah, it looks like they had ledges.
Yeah, there are ledges.
Yeah, no, I don't know what happened to the shelves. We've got windows, we've got screens, but I've never saw any shelves.
I've never seen anything that small.
Right.
Remember those bug lights being on?
They used to have candy along the bottom here as well.
George, do you remember the shelves since it came back?
I have no idea. But I'm sure.
All right, one more. Smile. Good.
Now we have a electric sun. We got lots of lights. Lights all work. And run the top.
It was pretty much.
All the wood.
Very nice.
This was the roaster.
Or the peanuts.
It's the peanut from the peanuts.
The roasters, and this is the power unit for the top.
Boy, but in the day, that would have been some serious engineering.
That did not come back. That did look at the material, that did not come back.
No, I know, and then they took it off. But there was a butter roller he used to take through the top.
Oh, you'd actually throw the popcorn in there and butter.
I mean, it was a roller, all he
Yeah.
does is just take it through the top and over there.
So could you explain what the roller would be? Would they?
The popcorn would, you throw the popcorn in there and then it would pop out
Okay,
and this would be all full of popcorn.
okay, and then he would just butter it by.
No, there was a roller
Oh, okay.
that you take and
It would fall in there and then he
then
would take it out somewhere.
then
Oh,
he
okay.
would just take and roll it over there.
Oh, okay.
So he would throw the popcorn in here
Right,
and
right.
that would that spin
Yes.
based on the
Yes.
motor?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and with a certain amount of temperature and time, it would spit out
Right.
the popcorn.
And then he used to have a container here where he had his popcorn.
Okay.
And then he had a teapot like that would have butter in it if you wanted extra butter.
Oh, okay.
So John, why don't you explain to everyone the parts that are now not yellow?
Oh, this was all, I mean, this is all because of being in the apple orchard.
So this was yellow?
It was kind of a yellowish.
Not the
It wasn't
blue.
this dark.
Wasn't this dark?
It wasn't this dark.
So this is paint, this is painted? No, that's
It was
varnish?
varnish.
So they
Varnish.
stripped it down from the yellow and varnished it? Or varnished over
The
the?
guy that used to take and varnish it
Uh-huh.
and all that stuff was Bernie Barlow. Every year, he would take and do this. But the wood would be like this on the inside here.
Those are lighter.
Yeah,
Lighter.
Lighter.
Right.
Lighter oak.
yeah.
So the roof would have
There's some
been
yellow,
yellow.
John.
This is the color it would be. Like
Yeah.
that. But being in the
Kinda.
apple orchard, the way they did things, it just, when I first saw it when we went out to California, I couldn't believe it, I almost died. Because it was painted red. Color was not the right color.
Keith take off on us?
Yeah, they had to leave.
They had to leave. I was gonna ask him what he thought of. He's the young kid on the block. It's gonna be people like him that are gonna have to work on this thing.
So when you say yellow, the lower carriage was yellow?
Yes, all the metal, the wheels, everything.
And
We
then
got
the,
pictures
and the
of
roof?
that. I don't know. I'd have to, I think that was red.
Oh, okay. It's really good.
So if you look on the inside,
Yeah. This is just natural.
here's the peanut butter strip.